Hi, and welcome to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. I'm a retired 20-year veteran sergeant of the Los Angeles Police Department. I spent my entire 20-year career working in patrol within all four bureaus of the city of Los Angeles: Central Bureau, West Bureau, Valley Bureau, and South Bureau. I was also assigned to the infamous gang detail Operations South Bureau Crash. CRASH being the acronym for Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. Many of you who have been following me since day one know that I am not afraid or opposed to pulling the covers back, exposing that thin blue line, and speaking to you honestly and candidly about police culture, police training, and deciphering police code talk that companies speak that we hear from police chiefs when they have to try to explain away something that is really very difficult to justify. I'm also the author of an autobiography, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate, which chronicles my career on the Los Angeles Police Department, as well as the advocacy work that I began to get involved in 2014 after publishing my first book in 2013. You know what happened in 2014. There were a spate of deadly police encounters, starting with Eric Garner, Mike Brown here in Los Angeles, Ezell Ford, and then everything else that followed. Tamir Rice and Sandra Bland and Rayshard Brooks and George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and on and on and on. So I'll help you understand what it is that you can do to try to survive a police encounter. Holding court curbside will get you hurt, and I want to give you the tools and show you the red flags where an officer may be about to get aggressive with you. The goal being, at the end of that police encounter, for everyone to go home safely. And that's on both sides. Visit my website, CherylDorsey.com, that's CherylDorsey.com, and read the first chapter of my autobiography, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate, as well as my next to be released book in the Black and Blue series, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Whistleblower. Also, those of you who've been following me for a while know I have a lot of isms. You know, your agreement is not required. And most recently, the one that was heard around the world, all skinfolk ain't kinfolk. I put those Cheryl Dorsey isms on t-shirts, crewneck shirts, and hoodies. Anyone interested in purchasing one of those items, you can do so at my website, CherylDorsey.com. as well. Now, let's get to it. Welcome to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks End of the Year 2020 podcast. And what a year this has been. Oh my goodness. I am so happy, as probably most of you are, to see this year finally come to an end, and am hoping, praying, and believing that 2021 must not be anything similar to what we've experienced during the entirety of 2020. And so while I'm going to, start my podcast ending my year with you, much like we began talking about police brutality, police misconduct, and the coddling and sheltering by police chiefs and others, elected mayors and the like, what I want you to know in all of this is that we have a role to play as community members, me, you, and everyone else who is listening. While I'm not encouraged by things that have been occurring, because they've not ceased seemingly throughout the year, but there's still some stuff that we can do as a community. And part of that is we have to hold elected officials accountable. And when I say elected officials, I mean mayors who are elected, prosecutors, district attorneys who are elected, sheriffs who are elected officials. And then we have to compel them to hold those who serve at their pleasure, like police chiefs or city managers. We have to hold them accountable. City council members are elected officials. And so we need to hold all of these people accountable. We can't just continue to get mad week after week, murder after murder, complain amongst ourselves, say that we want something to be done, yet we aren't willing to roll up our sleeves and get involved and get engaged. And so I'm hoping that going forward, 2021 will look very different in terms of community engagement wholesale than it has in 2020. And so I'm going to be talking about some things that are continuing to go on. Most recently, there's a couple of events that I want to bring you up to speed on, and so we'll talk about that as well. But again, this is not a Debbie Downer podcast to end on. This is hopefully going to be something that will be motivating and uplifting and encouraging all of you to, in your own little corner, your own little neck of the world. Now that you know, when you know better, you do better. There's much work left for us to be done. We have a new administration taking the helm January 20th. And, while it's better than what we had, again, we got to hold those folks accountable too. And so we got to listen and pay particular attention. And that's why I talk the way that I do as an LAPD insider and former supervisor, patrol sergeant on the LAPD. That's why I speak the way that I do and give you the verbiage that you need to know, help you decipher police code talk and just downright bullshit when you hear it, so that you can counter that when you have an opportunity to speak with an elected official, a mayor, a supervisor, a commissioner, a sheriff, a prosecutor in your town. So let me start with this, because I've had some folks say that, they wanted me to do an interview with recently retired Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best, first Black female appointed to that position on the Seattle Police Department. She was appointed as police chief in 2018. And, there was much expected from her appointment. They were over there on the City of Seattle Commission, Council, and others feigning, if you ask me, that this was going to somehow mean something, because this was, of course, their first Black female police chief. And Seattle is described as one of the country's whitest major cities. And so I had an opportunity to be a part of a panel discussion over in Purdue University with the retired Chief Carmen Best. And, I hate to do black on black crime, but I got to call a thing a thing. Ooh-wee. I was really not surprised, but just a little disappointed that Carmen didn't want to call a thing herself when we were being asked questions by some of the students over there at Purdue University. And I wish I could share that hour-and-a-half long discussion that we had, but it's not anything that's available for the public. As far as I know, you might from time to time check on YouTube with regards to Purdue University. I believe it was called Policing in America, something about racial injustice or racial justice. You may be able to find it if and when they put it up. But the long and the short of it is that, Carmen Best seemed reluctant, I'll just say it like that, to admit and acknowledge the problem that we all know exists on police departments, not just hers, not just LAPD, but I would venture to say all 18,000 in these United States. One of the last questions that someone asked was, can we expect that things will be better in 2021? And Carmen responded to it first, and she said, yes, she believes that things will be better. She's very optimistic. Me, not so much. And the reason that I'm not is because of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you later on in this podcast. And so she was very positive about, we're talking now, and this is, what we need to do, have conversations. And I'm like, girl, when it was my turn, we've been talking. And I said, let's just go back to 2014 with Eric Garner, Mike Brown, Ezell Ford, Tamir Rice, John Crawford. Ooh, and everything that jumped off in 2014, right? We've been talking and nothing has changed. Absolutely nothing. And really, we were talking way before that. I can go back as far as, Rodney King, right? That was the first time that we saw something outrageous and egregious captured on video, and conversation started, and nothing has changed since Rodney King, and nothing has changed since 2014. And here we are now at the end of 2020. And guess what? Nothing has changed. Now, why Carmen Best don't want to call a thing is beyond me. I would have to surmise because, after all, she breathes that special air that only a very few get to breathe, being a Black female police chief. And so, listen, the problems that they had on Seattle Police Department was nothing new. It wasn't anything that was foreign to Carmen. She was a 28-year veteran before she was appointed as the police chief on that department. So she knows intimately about Seattle's reported troubled history on race. And so while she was appointed police chief, and I think it was just window dressing, she was able to hire during her tenure 108 police officers, trying to increase the diversity on her department. And so, city council, they let her go ahead and hire 108 officers. Girl, go ahead, do your thing. The city council recently decided to downsize their 1,400 person force by as many as 100 officers. So basically, they just nullified Carmen Best's hiring of 108 because it's reported that under police labor contracts over there in Seattle, the officers hired most recently are generally first in line to be laid off. So Chief Best was not happy about the way the department was being dealt with by the city council. And so she said, you know what, I've had enough. It's been real and it's been fun, but it ain't been real fun. And so she decided to resign back in September of 2020. Now, in 2012, there was a federal investigation and they found a pattern of excessive use of force and biased policing over there on the Seattle Police Department. Again, none of this was news to Carmen Best, a 28-year veteran of that department. And so the city had entered into a consent decree with the U.S. Department of Justice committing to improvements. And that's what always happens, right? There's a consent decree, and while they're under it, everybody plays nice until the consent decree is lifted. And so with Carmen Best on the helm, the department and the city had hoped, allegedly, that they would be released from this consent decree agreement as soon as this year, right? And so that kind of lets you know that the whole appointment, in my mind, of Carmen Best, a Black woman, the first Black woman, was really nothing more than window dressing. It was an effort to get from under that consent decree. And they put enough obstacles and stumbling blocks in her way, seemingly failed to provide her with the support that she needed to do the things they pretended they wanted done. And so she said, I'm out of here. I'm not going to stick around for this. There were demonstrations during the summer of 2020 that intensified the problems in the relationship, allegedly, between the city, the elected officials over there, and Carmen Best. And so that began the beginning of her end. The relationship between Carmen Best and the city leaders began to deteriorate. And then they said, because protesters were demanding, they wanted cuts from the police department's budget. And part of those cuts were going to have to do with the decrease in the police chief and her command staff's salary. Now, I don't know. I'm not in her head or her heart. I don't know her heart, but Carmen Best said that her retiring in September of 2020 had nothing to do with her salary coming down. I don't know. I have to take her word at it. But nonetheless, she pulled the pin before that little caveat went into effect. And so she retired. Again, she is part of a very select group. It's reported that only 4% of police chiefs in the nation are Black and 3% are women. That was as of 2016. Now, Carmen came on in 2018, so obviously the numbers are a little different. But nonetheless, she's gone. She didn't get the support that she needed. And why she's reluctant to say that things are still screwed up over on Seattle PD and around the nation, given what we see and what we know continuing to occur, I don't understand. I don't understand. I say when elected officials, just like anybody else, when they show you who they are, you need to believe them. And so therein lies the rub. And that's the task that I put before all of you. Many, many elected officials have showed us who they are. I believe them. Do you? So that's it, family. A lot going on. Nothing has changed. This is it for 2020. It's a wrap. Stick a fork in it and me. Woo! I'm done. Now I need you to do your part in 2021. Hold these elected officials accountable. I've given you some names to make note of and to be on the lookout for when an opportunity presents itself. Or shoot, don't even wait. Get an email address, get a telephone number, find a Twitter account, and reach out to these people and find out how and when they're going to hold these errant officers on these various police departments accountable. Closed mouth doesn't get fed, family. If we don't ask, if we don't demand, we can't get mad when this stuff continues to occur. Wishing everybody a safe and happy New Year, and I will see you next year. Be good. Be safe.
You have been listening to the Sergeant Dorsey Speaks podcast, produced by the Get Global Network. Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey is a television commentator, social justice advocate, and is also well known for her book, Black and Blue, Creation of a Social Advocate, an autobiography of her 20-year career as a Black woman on the Los Angeles Police Department. The book details what she learned as an LAPD insider. Sergeant Dorsey can be contacted through her website, CherylDorsey.com, or via any of her social media sites like YouTube and Facebook. Take the time to subscribe to her YouTube channel and also subscribe to this podcast via major podcast networks like iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcast, and many others. The podcast is also available on wireless speaker systems like Alexa and Sonos.